The immigration system didn't start out looking like it does today. It didn't begin as one complex, structured system with multiple moving parts. It became that over time. And at this point, most people simply describe the system as broken. But that framing misses something that's vitally important because we're actually looking at a system that was built over decades. Different policies, different priorities, and different solutions created for different problems. And at each stage, the goal wasn't just to design the perfect long-term system. It was to solve whatever problem was currently right in front of it. So if you want to understand how we ended up with what looks like a fragmented system today, you can't start looking at the system as it exists now. You have to understand how the system like this actually forms in the first place. Most complex systems don't start out complex. They become complex over time as priorities change. And it's usually not by design. Because here's something that's easy to forget. Nobody sat down one day and wrote the immigration system that we have currently. There was no master blueprint for the system that we have now. It was developed over time. One policy, one reform, one response to a problem after another. And every generation was trying to solve problems that existed in front of them at that time. A policy gets created, it solves one problem. Then another problem shows up and a new policy is created to address that one. And then another appears, and over time, those decisions begin to stack up. Not in a clean way, not in a coordinated way, but in a way that reflects whatever the country was dealing with at the moment. And here's why that matters. Because immigration policy isn't just one decision. It's a long chain of decisions made across different eras, each trying to solve different versions of the same problem. And here's the part that's easy to miss. Those policies didn't disappear when the next generation arrived. Quite the opposite. They stayed. New policies were added, new solutions were created, new pressures emerged. Now, all of those policies, all of those decisions are trying to function as one system, even though some of them were never originally designed to work together. Once you understand that, the question no longer becomes, why is the system fragmented? But it does become, how did we even get here? To understand the immigration system we have today, we need to start in the 1960s. Not because that's where immigration started. It isn't. People have been immigrating to the United States for generations. But the 1960s represents one of the biggest turning points in the modern immigration system. Simply put, the priorities started to shift. Family reunification became a large focus. New pathways to citizenship were created. New rules were established. And many of those decisions still influence immigration policy today. At the time, the policymakers were trying to solve the challenges that they were facing in that moment. And don't get me wrong, in many, many ways they did. What matters for our story is that many of those decisions are still shaping the system decades later. As immigration increased, and the country changed, new questions began to emerge. Questions about labor, questions about enforcement, questions about how many people should be admitted under what conditions. The system was now being asked to do more than it had ever been intended to do. And different groups wanted different things from it. Some wanted more legal immigration. Some wanted stricter enforcement. Some wanted both. As those pressures increased, policymakers responded. And with each response, the system became responsible for more and more of these goals, more expectations, and more competing priorities. By the 1980s, something interesting happened. Policymakers were trying to address multiple concerns at the same time. Enforcement became a larger focus. But at the same time, so did legalization. In other words, the response wasn't moving entirely in one direction. It was moving in several directions at once. That tension is important because it reveals something that still exists today. Immigration policy often tries to accomplish multiple goals that don't always fit neatly together. And that balancing act would become one of the defining characteristics of the modern immigration system. And now you can forget almost everything we just talked about. Not because those things are unimportant. They are. Family reunification matters. Labor needs matter. Enforcement needs matters. All of it matters. But the reason is one event. And that event is September 11th. Overnight, immigration, when it's no longer viewed through the lens of labor, family, reunification, or humanitarian concerns, national security became the leading part of the conversation. And it's difficult to overstate how significant that shift was. Entire government agencies were reorganized. New enforcement structures were created. New security procedures were added. And in many ways, we took a system that had been built to accomplish one set of goals and threw a very heavy blanket of security concerns on top of it. And then we asked it to carry both. Whether it had been originally designed to do so or not. The result was a system trying to satisfy economic priorities, family priorities, humanitarian priorities, enforcement priorities, and security priorities, all at the same exact time. And once you see all those priorities sitting side by side, something becomes clear. The modern immigration system didn't inherit just one mission. It inherited all of them. Hey, but before we keep going, I'd like to take a moment and say, welcome. Pull up a seat at the coffee table, grab a cup of coffee, and let's talk. If you enjoy thoughtful conversations or you just like what I do, I'd appreciate it if you like the video, share it with someone who might enjoy it, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. It's one of the last free things we have left, and it really does help my channel grow. And as always, I've put a PDF of the policy in the description below. So if we step back and look at the entire picture, we can see how we got the system we have today. Most people imagine government systems are designed all at once, but immigration wasn't. It was built piece by piece, generation after generation, each generation responding to the problems of its time. And the solutions they created didn't disappear when the next generations arrived. Which means today's system isn't dealing with today's challenges. It's carrying the weight of decisions made decades ago. And in many ways, it's like policymakers are sometimes wrestling with ghosts from 40 years ago. So when people look at today's immigration system and wonder why it feels so complicated, part of the answer is that it's doing many jobs at once. Jobs that were added at different moments in history for different reasons. Understanding that history doesn't tell us how to fix the system, but it does help explain why simple solutions often prove more difficult than they first appear. Because once a system has been built over generations, changing one part of it affects many other parts. And that's actually where we're going to look at next. Because understanding how the system was built is one thing. Understanding why it's so difficult to change it is another. We'll tackle that in the next video. This is not in Kansas anymore, and for now, goodbye.